The tipping point. How little things can make a big difference. Malcolm Gladwell. Humors, cynicals, and translation. Gordon's finding became the template for the Air Walk campaign. If she found new trends or idea or concept that were catching fire among innovators around the country, the firm would plant those same concepts in the Airwalk ads they were creating. Once, for example, Gordon picked up on the fact that trendsetters were developing a sudden interest in Tibet and the Dalai Lama. The influencer rap band Beastie Boys were very publicly putting money into the free Tibet campaign and were bringing monks on stage at their concert to give testimonial. The Beastie Boys pushed the through and made it okay. Gordon remembers. So Lambesis made a very funny Airwalk ad with a young Airwalk wearing monk sitting at a desk in a classroom writing a test. He's looking down at his feet because his written cheat note on the side of his shoes. When a billboard version of the ad was put up in San Francisco, embassies were forced to take it down after Tibetan monks protested that monks don't touch their feet, let alone cheat one test. When James Bond started popping up on the trendsetter radar, embassies hired the director of James Bond movies to film a series of commercials, all of which featured work-clad characters making wild escapes from faceless villains. When trendsetter started to show an ironic interest in country club culture and began wearing old Brad Perry and Izod golf shorts, Airwalk made a shoe out of tennis ball material, and embassies made a print ad of the shoe being thrown up in the air and hit with a tennis racket. One time he noticed that the future technology things are really big. Gordon says, you'd ask some kid what they would invent if they could invent anything they wanted, and it was always about effortless living. Put your head in a bubble, push a button, and it comes out perfect. So it got our work to do this rounded, bubbly outsole for the shoes. We started mixing materials, meshing and pressable material and special type of Gore-Tex and laying them on the top of each other. To look through the inventory of Airwalk ads in the critical period, in fact, is to get a complete guide to the paths and impetuations and interests of the youth culture of the era. There are 30-second spoofs of kung fu movies, a TV spot of beat poetry, an X-Files style commercial in which a young man driving into Roswell, New Mexico, has his airworks confiscated by aliens. There are two explanations for why this strategy was so successful. The first is obvious. Embassies was picking on various very contagious trends while they were still in their infancy. By the time their new ad campaign and the shoes to go along with it were ready, the trend, with luck, would just be hitting the mainstream. Embassies In other words, was piggybacking on social epidemics, associating work with each new trend wave that swept through youth culture. It's a lie about teaming, Gordon says. You follow the trendsetters. You see what they are doing. It takes a year to produce those shoes. By the time the year goes, if your trend is the right trend, it's going to hit those mainstream people at the right time. So if you are future technology as a trend, if you see enough trend seller in enough city buying things that are ergonomic in design, or shoes that are jacked up, or little farm pilot, and when you ask them to invent something, they all talking about flying cars of the future. That's going to lead you to believe that with 6 months to a real everyone and his grandmother will be into the same thing. Ramesses wasn't just a passive observer in this process, however. It's also the case that their age helped to tip the idea they were discovering among innovators. Gordon says, for example, that when something failed to make it out of the trendsetter community into the mainstream, it's usually because the idea hasn't rooted itself broadly enough in the culture. There aren't enough cues. You didn't see it in music and film and art and fashion. Usually, if something goes to make it, you will see the thread running throughout everything. Through what they like on TV, what they want to invent, what they want to listen to, even the material they want to wear. It's everywhere. But if something doesn't make it, we'll only see it one of those areas. Emphasis was talking certain idea and planting them everywhere. And as they planted them, they provided with a critical translation. Gordon research showed the innovator quiz were heavily into the Dalai Lama and all of the very serious issue raised by the occupation of Tibet. So Ramesses took one very simple reference to that, the Tibetan monk, and put him in a funny, slightly tricky situation. They tweaked it. The innovator had a heavily ironic interest in country club culture. Emphasis lightened that. They made the shoe into a tennis ball, and they made the reference less arc and more funny. Innovators were into kung fu movies, so Ramesses made a kung fu parody ad in which the airwalk hero fighter of martial art villain it is skateboard. Ramesses took the kung fu motif and merged it with youth culture. In the case of Chinese scholars' vacation, according to all thought, the fact of a situation didn't make sense to the people of the towns. So they came up with an interpretation that did make sense, that the scholar was a spy, as to make the new interpretation work. Discordant detail was labeled out. Incidents were sharpened to fit the chosen theme, and the episode as a whole was assimilated to the pre-existing structure of feeling and thought characteristic of the member of the group among whom the rumor spread. That's just the Ramesses did. They took the cultural cue from the innovator, cue that the mainstream kids may have seen but not been able to make sense of, and labeled, sharpened, and assimilated them into a more coherent form. They gave those cues a specific meaning that they did not have previous and packaged them due sensibly in the form of a pair of shoes. It can hardly be a surprise that the airwalk rumor spread so quickly in 1995 and 1996.